My sister sold her house to fund her so-called freedom tour. Now my parents expect me to let her family of 4 move in for free. I said no. They made their own mess, and now they'll have to live with it. Can you imagine your own family expecting you to open your home, your sanctuary, to 5 extra people, indefinitely, all because your sister chose to blow up her entire life on a wild fantasy? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. And when I refused, the accusations of selfishness and betrayal began. I'm Sophia. I'm 34, and for as long as I can remember, I've been building my life, brick by meticulous brick. I've got a stable career as a financial advisor, a cozy condo overlooking Lake Michigan here in Chicago, and enough savings to actually sleep soundly at night. It's a life I earned, carefully, deliberately. My sister, Melissa, always chose a different path. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the day she sold her family's home, their only stability, for a freedom tour across America. Even more shocking? The phone call I got last week from my parents, casually expecting me to house Melissa, her husband, and their 2 kids for free indefinitely. Growing up, responsibility wasn't just a trait. It felt like it was tattooed on my personality before I could even spell the word. While other 10-year-olds were lost in Saturday morning cartoons, I was meticulously tracking my allowance in a Lisa Frank notebook. By 13, I was babysitting, saving nearly every dime. Through high school, I worked at a bookstore. In college, I waited tables to maintain my scholarship. Every single penny had a purpose. After graduation, while my friends splurged on European adventures, I was building my emergency fund and saving for a down payment on my condo. Melissa, 2 years younger, was my polar opposite. She floated through life on charm and impulse. Her room was a perpetual clothing explosion. Homework materialized minutes before class. Her college fund? Drained midway through sophomore year when she decided to follow a boyfriend to a music festival in another state. Yet, somehow, her careless approach never seemed to have lasting consequences. Melissa is just finding herself, my mother would sigh, writing another check to cover my sister's rent after she quit a job to pursue a new passion. One time it was pottery. Before that, photography. Before that, becoming a yoga instructor. None of them lasted more than a few months. Meanwhile, our father would just shrug helplessly. She's got her mother's free spirit, he'd say, the unspoken implication hanging heavy in the air. I inherited his practical nature, which was somehow portrayed as less vibrant, less interesting. When Melissa met Rick at 25, our family breathed a collective sigh of relief. He seemed grounded, an electrician with a steady income. Their wedding was small and sweet, though I ended up covering half the costs when Melissa's elaborate plans, predictably, exceeded their budget. I told myself it was an investment in her stability. Maya came along a year later, then Tyler 2 years after that. My niece and nephew became the absolute bright spots in our family gatherings. Smart, funny kids who somehow thrived despite the chaos that often swirled around my sister's household. I adored them fiercely. I even quietly set up education funds for both of them, despite Melissa's eye-rolling about living in the moment. 3 years ago, when Melissa and Rick bought a modest 3-bedroom home in the suburbs, I felt a genuine surge of happiness. Maybe motherhood had finally anchored her. The house wasn't fancy, but it had a backyard for the kids and good schools nearby. For the first time, my sister seemed to embrace responsibility. "You should see Maya's room, Soph," she called, bubbling with excitement after they moved in. "We painted it purple just like she wanted, and Tyler's got space for all his dinosaurs." The pride in her voice actually made me hopeful. My own life continued on its steady path. As a financial advisor, I helped others secure their futures while carefully building my own. I dated occasionally, but hadn't met anyone worth rearranging my carefully constructed life for. My condo, a 2-bedroom with a home office overlooking Lake Michigan, became my sanctuary. Clean lines, organized spaces, everything perfectly in its place. Our family settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sunday dinners at my parents' house every other week, birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings. But beneath that surface, the old dynamic stubbornly persisted. When Melissa needed last-minute childcare, I'd rearrange client meetings to help. When their refrigerator died, I loaned them money for a new one, knowing deep down I'd probably never see it again. When Rick's truck needed repairs, I researched affordable mechanics and drove him to the shop. Each time, the same pattern emerged. Melissa would make a poor choice, find herself in a bind. My parents would pressure me to help, and I, reluctantly, would step in to maintain family peace. My resentment grew, festering beneath a lifetime of practiced accommodation. 6 months ago, I finally started therapy. Dr. Winters helped me recognize my enabling patterns and gently encouraged boundary-setting exercises. Your sister's emergencies aren't automatically your responsibility, she'd remind me each session. I nodded along, though implementing these boundaries felt like trying to speak a language I'd never learned. Around the same time, I started noticing Melissa's social media shifting. Her Instagram feed, once filled with family photos and home decor projects, began featuring vans converted into tiny homes. Sun-kissed couples posing beside national park signs. Families cooking meals on portable stoves beside crystal-clear lakes. "Don't you ever get tired of being in the same place every day?" she asked me during a family barbecue, her phone perpetually in hand, scrolling through another van life account. "Not really," I answered honestly. "I like my routines." She looked at me with something like pity. "That's so sad, Soph. There's a whole world out there." I bit back the retort that I was well aware of the world's existence. I'd simply chosen stability over spontaneity, a choice that had served me remarkably well. Instead, I asked about the kids' summer plans, steering us towards safer conversational waters. Looking back, I should have recognized those comments as flashing warning flares. But I truly couldn't imagine that my sister, now a mother of 2 school-aged children with a mortgage and community ties, would actually act on her restless scrolling. Some part of me still believed that adult responsibilities had finally tethered her to reality. I was catastrophically wrong. The announcement came during Sunday dinner 3 months ago. My parents had prepared lasagna, the good china, usually reserved for special occasions, suddenly appearing on the table. I should have recognized the setup. "We have some exciting news," Melissa announced, gripping Rick's hand. He smiled tightly, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "We've listed our house for sale." The dining room fell silent, save for the clatter of my fork against the plate. "Are you moving to a bigger place?" my father asked, hopefully. Melissa's face lit up with an almost manic excitement. "We're hitting the road. We're done with the suburban prison, the mortgage, the monotony, the soul-crushing routine." "What about the kids' school?" I asked, looking at Maya and Tyler, who were pushing pasta around their plates, unusually quiet. "We're going to road school them," Melissa said dismissively. "They'll learn more seeing the Grand Canyon than sitting at a desk memorizing useless facts." My mother, after an initial moment of concern, shifted quickly to enthusiasm. "How wonderful! What an adventure for the children." She turned to my father. "Remember when we talked about doing something like this before we had the girls?" He nodded, though I couldn't recall them ever mentioning such plans. "Where will you live?" he asked. "We're getting a van," Melissa exclaimed. "One of those Mercedes Sprinters, fully converted with a kitchenette and sleeping spaces for all of us. We'll follow the good weather, take odd jobs along the way if needed, but mostly just exist. Truly live, you know." I glanced at Rick, who was studying his wine glass with unusual intensity. After dinner, while Melissa showed my parents Pinterest boards of van conversions on her tablet, I cornered Rick in the kitchen. "Are you really on board with this?" I asked quietly. His shoulders slumped slightly. "It's what Melissa wants. But what about what you want? What about what's best for the kids?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She says we're all trapped in societal expectations, that the kids are being programmed for corporate slavery." He lowered his voice. "Honestly, I think she's just bored. And seeing all these perfect Instagram families living authentic lives has her convinced we're missing out." "And your job?" I pressed. "I'm supposed to find temporary work along the way. Electricians can find gigs anywhere." He didn't sound convinced. "Have you made a budget for this plan? Calculated emergency funds? What about healthcare?" Rick's uncomfortable expression told me everything. Melissa says we're overthinking it. That everything will work out if we just trust the universe. He made air quotes with visible frustration. Before I could respond, Melissa bounded into the kitchen. What are you two whispering about? Just catching up, I lied, meeting Rick's grateful glance. The house sold alarmingly quickly in that hot market. They got $40,000 above asking price, enough for a significant cushion if managed properly. But instead of setting aside emergency funds or securing temporary housing while converting a reasonably priced van, Melissa went all in. She documented every step on social media. The custom Mercedes Sprinter van alone cost nearly $60,000 before conversions. Another $30,000 went into building it out with bamboo paneling, solar panels, a composting toilet, and custom cabinetry. Each upgrade was showcased with gleaming Instagram posts. #vanlife, #freedomjourney, #escaping thematrix. But the children's faces in those photos told a different story. Maya, usually so animated, appeared withdrawn. Tyler clung to his dinosaur collection, which had been ruthlessly pared down to just 3 plastic figures that could fit in the van's minimal storage. I tried raising concerns during a coffee meetup. Have you thought about schooling materials, medical emergencies in remote areas? What happens if the van breaks down? Melissa waved away my questions. You're such a worrier, Soph. That's why you're stuck in that corporate hamster wheel. We'll figure things out as they come. That's the beauty of this lifestyle. But the kids need stability, structure, I argued. That's just programming talking, she countered, her voice taking on the rehearsed quality of someone quoting influencers. Kids thrive on new experiences. They're adaptable. Our ancestors were nomads, you know. Our ancestors also had significantly shorter lifespans and few educational requirements for survival, I thought, but didn't say. When Rick quit his stable job 2 weeks before their departure, reality began setting in for me. He'd worked for the same electrical company for 6 years, building seniority and benefits. All abandoned for living in the moment. My parents threw them a farewell party, complete with a cake shaped like their van. Friends and extended family gathered to toast their courage and their vision. I stood in the corner, nursing a glass of wine, feeling like the only sane person in a collective delusion. Aren't you proud of your sister? My mother asked, sidling up beside me. Taking control of her life like this? It seems less like taking control and more like abandoning responsibility, I said carefully. Her expression hardened. Not everyone wants to live a boring, safe life like you, Sophia. Some people need more than spreadsheets and retirement plans to feel fulfilled. The words stung more than I cared to admit. Was my life boring? Was stability such a character flaw? I'd built everything I had through careful planning and hard work. Yet somehow, I was positioned as the family failure for not chasing implausible dreams and Instagram aesthetics. As they pulled away in their gleaming van 2 days later, Maya's small face pressed against the window. I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. This wouldn't end well, and somehow I suspected I would be expected to pick up the pieces when it all fell apart. The first month of Melissa's Freedom Tour unfolded across my social media feed like a glossy travel magazine. Sunrise yoga beside mountain lakes, the children's delighted faces as they spotted wild horses in Wyoming. Glamorous campsite dinners with fairy lights strung across the van's awning. Each image meticulously filtered and captioned with inspirational quotes about escaping societal constraints. Maybe I was wrong, I admitted during a therapy session with Dr. Winters. They seem happy. She tilted her head. Social media rarely shows the complete picture. How are they really doing? I shrugged. Melissa texts occasionally. Short messages about amazing views and life-changing experiences. Nothing substantial. And the children? I paused. She hasn't let me talk to them directly. Says they're too busy living in the present. Dr. Winters made a non-committal sound. Keep the lines of communication open. Be there when they need you, not if. Her words proved prophetic sooner than expected. 6 weeks into the journey, the carefully curated social media facade began showing cracks. Posts became less frequent. The jubilant captions gained a defensive edge. Van life isn't always glamorous, but we're not tourists. We're living this. Melissa wrote beneath a photo of a cramped interior, clothes hanging everywhere, dishes piled in the tiny sink. Comments from her followers shifted from admiring to concerned. "Where are the kids going to school?" someone asked. Melissa's reply was a vague paragraph about world schooling and experiential learning that conspicuously avoided mentioning any actual educational materials or schedule. The mechanical problems started in Colorado. The expensive van, it turned out, required equally expensive repairs. Minor setback. #vanliferiality. Melissa posted beside an image of the van at a specialty shop. The post didn't mention the $3,000 bill that accompanied the repair. But my father let it slip during our weekly phone call. "They're just finding their footing," he said defensively when I expressed concern. "All new ventures have startup costs." This venture had consumed their house and life savings, I wanted to point out. Instead, I asked, "How are Maya and Tyler adjusting?" A pause. "They miss their friends. School started last week, and Maya's been asking about her teacher from last year." My heart sank. "Are they following any curriculum at all?" "Melissa says they're learning geography firsthand," my father replied, but his usual certainty sounded hollow. Then came the first desperate call. It was 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I'd been asleep for an hour when Melissa's ringtone jolted me awake. Soft. Her voice sounded small, muffled, the background noise suggesting she was huddled outside the van. "We're having some money issues." I sat up, fully alert. "What kind of issues?" "The van needed another repair, and campgrounds are way more expensive than we budgeted for, and gas prices are insane." She paused. "Could you maybe loan us a couple thousand, just until Rick finds more consistent work?" My thoughts raced to the children. "Where are you now?" "Some tiny town in Utah. There's not much work here, but we can't afford to drive to a bigger city until payday. And that's still 10 days away." I took a deep breath. "I'm happy to look over your budget and help you make a plan, but I'm not comfortable just sending money without addressing the underlying issues." Silence stretched between us. "You've got plenty of money," she finally said, her voice hardening. "But fine. Forget it." "Melissa, that's not what I meant. I want to help, but just throwing money at the problem won't solve anything long term." "We don't need your financial advisor lecture. We need help," she snapped, before hanging up. The next day, she posted a sunset photo with the caption, "Some people will never understand the value of freedom over material security. Their loss. #NoRegrets, #TrustTheJourney." I knew the barb was aimed squarely at me. What she didn't share online was that our parents had transferred $1,500 to her account that same day. Money they could ill afford on their fixed retirement income. Rick found sporadic work in the weeks that followed, a day helping wire a hunting cabin, 3 days at a small construction site. Never enough for stability, barely enough for necessities. Their social media presence grew increasingly desperate beneath a forced positivity. Embracing minimalism means appreciating simple meals. Rice and beans again. #grateful, Melissa posted beside a photo of the children eating basic meals from paper bowls. Video calls with my parents offered glimpses of the deteriorating situation. In the background, I could hear Melissa and Rick arguing about money, about roots, about whose idea this had been in the first place. Maya appeared in the corner of one call, her hair unwashed, clutching a tattered workbook. "How's school, sweetheart?" I asked when my parents stepped away momentarily. Her eyes filled with tears. "I miss Miss Peterson. Mom says we're doing road school, but she lowered her voice. We mostly just drive around while she takes pictures." Before I could respond, Melissa whisked her away, shooting a resentful look at the camera. The weather turned against them as October arrived. Their plan to follow the sunshine collided with budget constraints and fuel costs. Cold nights in the van required propane heating, another expense they hadn't adequately prepared for. Instagram posts showed them huddled in blankets, pretending that shivering was a charming aspect of their authentic journey. My parents called more frequently, their voices strained. "They just need to get through this adjustment period," my mother insisted, though with diminishing conviction. Each call ended with not-so-subtle hints about my comfortable condo, with its extra bedroom going to waste. I held firm. They made a choice. They need to find their own solutions. "Family helps family," my father countered. I'm happy to help them create a budget, find affordable housing, or look for job opportunities, I replied. But I'm not an emergency shelter. Deep down, though, I worried about Maya and Tyler. They hadn't asked for this upheaval, this instability. During rare moments when I glimpsed them on video calls, they looked tired, subdued versions of the vibrant children I'd known. As November approached, Melissa's carefully constructed freedom narrative completely unraveled. Her posts grew rare, the tone bitter. People glamorize van life, but don't talk about the constant judgment from conformists who can't understand choosing experience over possessions. Still no regrets. The accompanying photo showed a parking lot at dusk, not the majestic scenery that had once dominated her feed. Reading between the lines, I sensed the freedom tour was circling the drain. Rick and Melissa's marriage was visibly straining. The children were falling behind educationally and socially. Money was critically short, and winter was coming, making their living situation increasingly untenable. I braced myself for the crash I knew was imminent. It arrived sooner and more catastrophically than even my worst predictions. The van died in dramatic fashion outside a small town in Nevada. Not just a minor repair this time, but a catastrophic transmission failure. According to Melissa's tearful call to our parents, Rick had apparently been warning about strange noises for weeks, but they couldn't afford to stop for diagnostics. Now they were stranded. The van limped to a specialized repair shop, where the news went from bad to worse. 12,000. How is that possible? My mother gasped during our 3-way call. It's a Mercedes with custom very thing, I reminded her, biting back the urge to say I'd warned them about this very scenario. We don't have that kind of money, my father said. We already sent them most of our emergency fund last month. While my parents discussed tapping into their retirement savings, a dangerous move of their age, I asked the practical question, where are they staying now? Some motel called the Sunset Inn, my mother replied, $49 a night, but that adds up quickly. I did the mental math, with repairs that would take at least 2 weeks, plus basic living expenses, plus eventual gas money to go somewhere. They were looking at a financial hole too deep to climb out of. Maybe it's time they consider selling the van for parts and finding a more sustainable living situation, I suggested. My mother gasped as if I'd proposed abandoning the children in the desert. They can't give up on their dream. Mom, I said, my voice tight, the dream is already gone. They're stuck in a motel in Nevada with no money and no plan. That evening, I received a call directly from Melissa. Her voice sounded raw, defeated, in a way I'd never heard before. You were right, she admitted, the words clearly difficult for her. This was a mistake. All of it. I sat down, shocked by the admission. Tell me what's happening. The story poured out between sobs. Their last few $100s gone to the motel and food. Rick working a temporary construction job that barely covered daily expenses, let alone the massive repair bill. The van essentially worthless without fixing the transmission. Debt accumulating on their single remaining credit card. The children missing months of proper education. Maya developing anxiety. Tyler having nightmares. I ruined everything, she whispered. Our house. The kids' stability. Rick's job. For once, I didn't offer solutions or say, I told you so. What do you want to do now? I don't know, she admitted. Rick says we should sell the van for whatever we can get, find the cheapest apartment somewhere, and start over. But that feels like admitting total failure. It's not failure to recognize when something isn't working, I said gently. It takes courage to change course. We can't afford first and last month's rent anywhere decent, she continued, her voice cracked. And without Rick's steady job history these past few months, no one will rent to us anyway. The kids deserve better than this. I suggested practical steps: sell the van, find temporary housing, look for places with a lower cost of living where Rick's skills would be in demand, create a strict budget to rebuild savings. I can't do it, Melissa said after a long pause. I can't give up yet. We just need to fix the van and find somewhere warmer for winter. By spring, we'll figure something out. The stubborn denial in her voice concerned me more than the situation itself. And how will you pay for the repairs? The universe will provide, she said with desperate conviction. It has to. Apparently, Melissa's version of the universe was our parents. The next day, I discovered they'd maxed out their credit card to help with the van repairs. Money they couldn't afford to spend, plunging themselves into debt at a stage of life when they should be financially secure. We had no choice, my father defended when I confronted them. Those are our grandchildren stranded out there. There were other choices, I countered, practical ones that didn't involve throwing good money after bad. You've always been so hard on your sister, my mother said. Not everyone has your financial privileges. I bit back the retort that my privileges were the result of a decade of careful decisions and delayed gratification. Instead, I asked, what happens when the van breaks down again? Or when winter makes living in it impossible? This isn't sustainable. Well, my mother began, not quite meeting my eyes. We were thinking your condo has that spare bedroom and home office. If you converted the office to a bedroom, there would be space for all of them temporarily. I stared at the phone in disbelief. You want Melissa's family of 4 to live in my 2-bedroom condo for how long? Just until they get back on their feet, my father jumped in. 3 months, maybe 6 at most. And who suggested this idea? I asked, though I already knew. My mother hesitated. Melissa mentioned it might be a possibility. And you told her it was? I pressed. Another pause. We might have indicated you'd be open to the discussion. Cold dread settled in my stomach. Have you already told her this is happening? The silence stretched tellingly. You promised her they could stay with me without even asking me first? I fought to keep my voice level. Family helps family, Sophia, my father said firmly. You have the space and means to help your sister through this rough patch. It's not a rough patch, I said. It's the predictable outcome of a series of terrible decisions. And my condo can barely fit me comfortably when I'm working from home, let alone 5 additional people. So, your comfort matters more than your niece and nephew having a roof over their heads? My mother's voice dripped with disappointment. The manipulation was so blatant, it momentarily left me speechless. When I found my voice again, I asked one final question. When are they planning to arrive? They're getting the van back tomorrow. If they drive straight through, probably Saturday morning, 3 days from now. They had decided my life would be completely upended in 3 days, without consultation or consent. I need to go, I said flatly, ending the call before they could respond. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. Then I did something I'd never done before. I typed out a text message to our family group chat, which included Melissa, Rick, and our parents. We need to have an emergency family discussion. Video call tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern. Everyone must attend. This is non-negotiable. At precisely 7 o'clock the next evening, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. One by one, the video squares populated. My parents in their living room, looking apprehensive. Rick in what appeared to be a motel bathroom, presumably seeking privacy. Melissa last, her face set in a familiar expression of defensive entitlement. Thanks for making time for this, I began formally. We need to address some miscommunications and set clear expectations. If this is about us staying with you, Melissa jumped in, we promise we won't be in your way. The kids can share the office, Rick and I can take the spare room. We'll be super quiet during your work hours. The casual presumption stole my breath momentarily. She spoke as if the arrangement was already settled, just missing a few details. Actually, that's exactly what we need to discuss, I said, finding my voice. I want to be clear that I never agreed to this arrangement. I was informed yesterday that you all made this plan without consulting me. My mother's face flushed. Sophia, now isn't the time for selfishness. Your sister's family needs help. I'm happy to help in ways that make sense, I replied evenly. But having 5 people move into my small condo indefinitely isn't realistic or reasonable. Melissa's expression darkened. You have 2 bedrooms plus an office in downtown Chicago, and you're claiming there's not enough space? Do you know what we've been living in for months? Yes, I do, I said. A van that you chose to live in after selling a perfectly good house. And my condo is 1,200 square feet total. The 2nd bedroom barely fits a full-size bed, and my office is 8 by 10 feet. It's not designed for a family of 4. We don't need luxury, Rick interjected, looking uncomfortable. Just somewhere to regroup. I nodded at him. I understand that, but even basic logistics make this impossible. Where would everyone sleep? Where would 6 people eat? How would I conduct client video meetings with children in the background? And who would pay for the massive increase in utilities, food, and other expenses? We thought you'd cover that temporarily, my father said, given your financial position compared to theirs. I took a deep breath. Let me make sure I understand. You expect me to surrender my private space, my work environment, and my financial resources to support a situation created entirely by Melissa and Rick's choices. That's what family does, my mother insisted. No, I countered. Family supports each other through unforeseeable hardships and genuine emergencies. This situation was entirely foreseeable and repeatedly warned against. Melissa's face contorted. You've always been so judgmental. Just because I didn't want to be trapped in a soul-crushing routine like you doesn't make my choices wrong. Your choices aren't wrong because they're different, I said carefully. They're problematic because they were financially unsustainable and disregarded your children's needs for stability. You don't have children. Melissa shot back. You have no idea what they need. I know they need consistent education, healthcare, social interaction with peers, and adults they can rely on to make responsible decisions. I said, and right now you and Rick aren't providing those things. How dare you question our parenting? Melissa's voice rose sharply. My father intervened. Let's all calm down. Sophia, you have plenty of space and money. Would sharing temporarily really be such a hardship compared to what they're going through? It's not about hardship comparison, I explained. It's about enabling destructive patterns versus helping create sustainable solutions. You just don't want to be inconvenienced, my mother said dismissively. Something snapped. Inside me, years of accumulated resentment finally found its voice. Inconvenienced? Let's talk about inconvenience. Was it an inconvenience when I co-signed Melissa's first apartment lease because she had no credit and then covered 3 months' rent when she quit her job to find herself? Was it an inconvenience when I paid for half her wedding because she and Rick spent their savings on a spontaneous trip to Bali? Was it an inconvenience when I set up education funds for Maya and Tyler because neither of you bothered planning for their future? The screen fell silent, shocked faces staring back at me. I have helped repeatedly for years. I've given money I knew I'd never see again. I've provided childcare on a moment's notice. I've researched solutions for every crisis. And each time the pattern repeats because there are never any consequences for poor choices. Rick cleared his throat. Sophia's right. Melissa's head whipped toward him off-screen. What? She's right, he repeated, louder. We've been making terrible decisions, and everyone's been cushioning the fall. Mostly Melissa's decisions, if I'm honest. Rick. Melissa gasped. It's time for truth, he continued, a new firmness in his voice. Sophia, the transmission wouldn't have failed if we'd gotten it checked when I first noticed problems. But Melissa spent that money on unnecessary things instead. What unnecessary things? My father asked. Rick looked pained. A $300 sunrise yoga workshop in Sedona. Designer clothes for her Instagram posts. A 2-night stay at a luxury glamping resort so she could get photos for her followers. My parents stared in disbelief. Is this true, Melissa? My mother asked. You're twisting everything. Melissa hissed at Rick. Those experiences were investments in our brand. We were going to monetize the journey eventually. The journey is over, Rick said flatly. We need to focus on rebuilding some kind of stability for the kids. An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, I spoke again, more gently. I'm willing to help in ways that make sense. I can contribute toward a security deposit for an apartment in an affordable area. I can help create a budget for rebuilding your finances. I can connect Rick with job opportunities through my professional network. But I cannot and will not let you move into my home. So, you're abandoning us? Melissa accused. No, I said. I'm refusing to enable another poor decision. There are realistic solutions here, but turning my condo into an overcrowded boarding house isn't one of them. My mother's face hardened. If you turn your back on your sister now, don't expect us to forgive you. Family stands together in crisis. This ultimatum works both ways, I replied steadily. If you insist that real family support means sacrificing my home, privacy, and financial security without question, then perhaps we have different definitions of what family means. Are you threatening to cut us off? My father asked incredulously. I'm setting a boundary. I love you all, but I won't be emotionally blackmailed into decisions that aren't viable for anyone involved. Let's end this call, my mother said coldly. Clearly, your sister's welfare means nothing to you. Before I could respond, their video square vanished. Melissa followed suit with a furious click. Only Rick remained. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what it's worth, I think you're right. Then his square disappeared, too, leaving me alone in my kitchen, shaking with adrenaline and emotion. I closed my laptop and walked to the window overlooking the lake. The water stretched dark and vast, city lights reflecting on its surface. For the first time in my adult life, I had directly refused my family's expectations. The liberation felt hollow, tangled with grief and doubt. Had I done the right thing? Was I a terrible sister and aunt for refusing to sacrifice everything? The familiar voice of guilt whispered that good family members don't calculate costs. They simply give without limit. But another voice, newer and still uncertain, countered. True support means helping people find sustainable solutions, not temporary bailouts that perpetuate destructive cycles. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and finally allowed myself to cry. The next morning, I called Dr. Winter's office and secured an emergency session. Sitting in her calm, plant-filled office, I described the confrontation and its aftermath. I keep wondering if I'm the villain here, I concluded. Dr. Winters considered this thoughtfully. Setting boundaries often feels villainous when you've been conditioned to self-sacrifice. But consider this. Would enabling their plan truly help anyone long-term? The kids would have stable housing, at least, I offered weakly. In a cramped space not designed for children, with parents whose relationship is clearly strained, and an aunt whose resentment would inevitably grow, she replied, raising an eyebrow. That doesn't sound stable or healthy for anyone involved. Her validation helped, but I still felt responsible for finding solutions. After our session, instead of returning to work, I parked myself at a coffee shop with my laptop and began researching. First, I looked into affordable housing options near the Nevada town where they were stranded. Rental prices were actually quite reasonable, especially compared to Chicago. I compiled a list of two-bedroom apartments ranging from $850 to $1,100 monthly, all within a reasonable distance of construction sites where Rick might find steady work. Next, I drafted a realistic financial recovery plan. If they sold the van, even at a significant loss, they could cover a security deposit and first month's rent. Rick's current construction job could cover basic expenses while he searched for something permanent. Melissa could find part-time work once the children were enrolled in school. I estimated they could achieve basic stability within 2 months and begin rebuilding savings within 6. I hesitated before the next step, then decided directness was necessary. I texted Rick, "Can we talk privately? I have some ideas that might help." His response came an hour later, motel lobby, 8 p.m. your time. Melissa takes the kids to the pool. That evening, connected via video, Rick looked exhausted, but more resolute than I'd seen him in months. "How bad is it?" I asked. He ran a hand over his face. "Worse than anyone knows. We're down to nothing. Your parents' money fixed the van, but we can barely afford this motel another 3 days. Melissa's still talking about finding somewhere to park the van for winter." He trailed off. "But it's not realistic," I finished. "None of this has been realistic," he admitted. I knew it from the start, but Melissa was so convinced it would work that we'd somehow join these picture-perfect van life families she follows online. He laughed bitterly. "Turns out those people all have trust funds or remote tech jobs paying 6 figures. How are Maya and Tyler?" His expression crumpled slightly. "They're troopers, but they're suffering. Maya cries at night when she thinks we're asleep. Tyler started wetting the bed again. They need stability, not another wild scheme." I nodded, then shared my research. As I outlined potential apartments and the financial plan, I watched hope cautiously return to his face. "This could actually work," he said slowly. "But Melissa will never agree. She sees returning to conventional living as personal failure. What about your marriage? I asked gently. He was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know if it can survive this. She blames me for not believing hard enough in the dream. I resent her for pressuring me into something I knew was irresponsible. He sighed heavily. But right now, the kids have to come first. I agree, I said. And I want to help make that happen. I can cover the security deposit and first month's rent on one of these apartments. Not alone. A gift for Maya and Tyler. Relief washed over his face. Sophia, that would be. I don't know how to thank you. You can thank me by getting those kids back into a stable situation, I said firmly. And by standing your ground if Melissa pushes for another unsustainable plan. He nodded, a new determination in his expression. I will. I've been too passive for too long. Over the next 2 days, Rick and I maintained discreet communication. He researched the apartments on my list, eventually selecting a modest 2-bedroom in a decent school district. The property manager agreed to expedite the application, given their situation. Meanwhile, I transferred funds for the deposit and first month's rent, plus a small buffer for immediate necessities. Rick found courage I hadn't known he possessed. He informed Melissa that he was taking the construction job permanently, that the children needed to return to traditional schooling, and that he'd secured housing for them all. The van would be sold to a specialty dealer who'd already made an offer, providing enough to cover basic furnishings and essentials for the apartment. She can join us in building a stable life, or she can continue the journey alone. He texted me after their confrontation. Her choice, but the kids stay with me either way. I wasn't privy to their full conversation, but the outcome spoke volumes. Melissa, faced with the reality of potentially losing her children, reluctantly agreed to the plan, while making it clear she considered it temporary. With one crisis addressed, I turned my attention to my parents. They hadn't spoken to me since the video call, their silence a familiar punishment technique. After considerable thought, I drove to their house unannounced one Sunday afternoon. My mother opened the door, her surprise quickly masked by coolness. Well, this is unexpected. Can I come in? I think we need to talk. She stepped aside wordlessly. My father sat in his recliner, lowering his newspaper as I entered. Sophia, he acknowledged stiffly. I sat on the sofa, hands folded in my lap. I wanted to let you know that Rick and I have found a solution. They're moving into an apartment next week. The kids will be back in school before Christmas break ends. My mother's eyebrows rose. Without your sister's input? Melissa has agreed to the plan, I said carefully, though she's not thrilled about it. So, you helped when it suited your terms? My mother said, the accusation clear. I took a deep breath. I helped in a way that actually addresses the problem rather than prolonging it. There's a difference between support and enabling. Easy for you to say from your perfect life, she snapped. My life isn't perfect, I countered, but it is stable because I make responsible choices, and I won't apologize for that anymore. My father cleared his throat. What exactly did you do to help them? I explained the apartment, the financial contribution, the job arrangements. As I spoke, I watched his expression shift from skepticism to reluctant approval. That's actually quite generous, he admitted. It's what I could comfortably give without compromising my own stability, I explained, which means I can continue to help in the future if necessary, rather than draining my resources all at once. My mother remained unmoved. You still refused to take them in when they needed shelter. Because that solution would have created more problems than it solved, I replied. Mom, I love Melissa and her family, but love doesn't mean having no boundaries. Boundaries, she repeated the word like it tasted bitter. In my day, we called that selfishness. No, I said firmly. Selfishness would be ignoring their situation entirely. I've invested time, money, and energy into finding real solutions, just not the particular solution you demanded. The conversation continued in circles, my mother clinging to her disappointment, while my father gradually thawed. By the time I left, we'd reached an uneasy truce. Not reconciliation, but perhaps its prerequisite. As I drove home, my phone chimed with a text from Rick. Signed the lease today. Kids are excited about having their own room again. Attached was a photo of Maya and Tyler standing in an empty apartment, their smiles tentative but real for the first time in months. That night, I received an unexpected call from my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister. I heard about the situation with Melissa. She began without preamble. "Your mother called to tell me what a heartless sister you've been." I sighed. "I'm not surprised." "I am," she replied. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're the only one making sense in this whole mess." Her support caught me off guard. "Really?" "Absolutely. Someone needed to break this cycle, and you had the courage to do it." She paused. "Your mother won't admit it, but you did exactly what needed to be done." As we talked, I realized the family dynamics extended beyond my immediate circle. Others had witnessed the pattern for years, but remained silent to keep peace. My stand had broken not just the cycle of enabling, but also the conspiracy of silence around it. By the end of the week, Rick sent photos of their modest, but functional apartment, now furnished with basic necessities. Maya and Tyler were enrolled in the local school starting after winter break. Rick had secured his construction job permanently, with potential for advancement. Melissa was still adjusting. Her social media was now conspicuously quiet, but she was investigating part-time work options. The situation remained fragile, their future uncertain. But for the first time in months, I felt genuine hope for my nieces and nephews' well-being. Not because I'd sacrificed everything to rescue them, but because I'd helped create conditions where sustainable recovery was possible. The hardest lesson proved to be the most valuable. Sometimes, true support means standing firm rather than giving way. 3 months passed. Winter yielded to early spring, both on Chicago's lakefront and in my family relationships. The apartment in Nevada had become a real home for Maya and Tyler. Their bedroom walls now displayed artwork and school certificates rather than Instagram-worthy landscapes. Rick had received a promotion at the construction company, moving from general labor to a position that utilized his electrical skills. Melissa's adjustment proved more difficult. Her initial resentment manifested as passive-aggressive social media posts about temporary setbacks and dreams deferred. But reality has a way of asserting itself. As the children thrived in their renewed stability, as finances slowly improved, even Melissa began acknowledging the benefits of their new situation. Maya got Student of the Month. She texted me unexpectedly one afternoon, attaching a photo of my niece holding a certificate, beaming with pride. No commentary about constraints or settling, just simple maternal pride. Small steps, fragile progress. My relationship with my parents evolved through uncomfortable but necessary conversations. My father came around first, calling one evening to discuss his retirement portfolio. Financial questions were his way of extending an olive branch. "You were right," he admitted awkwardly, after we'd reviewed his investments and discussed Melissa's situation. "We were enabling, not helping." "It's a difficult line to see when you love someone," I offered, giving him grace I hadn't felt in the heat of the conflict. "Your mother is having a harder time admitting it," he confided. "But she noticed how much better the kids look in the video calls. How much happier." My mother's reconciliation came more gradually. Small text messages asking about my day. Brief phone calls that carefully avoided mentioning Melissa at first, then slowly incorporated updates about the children's progress. The frost between us thawed degree by degree. A breakthrough arrived in the form of an unexpected apology during one of our now regular Sunday calls. "I've been thinking about what you said," my mother began hesitantly, "about support versus enabling, about how boundaries can be a form of love." I waited, sensing more to come. "Your grandmother did the same thing with me that I've done with Melissa," she continued. "Always made excuses, always cleaned up my messes. It took me years to learn responsibility because there were never consequences." She paused. "I didn't see the pattern repeating until you forced me to look at it." The admission cost her pride, and I recognized the gift in her vulnerability. "Thank you for telling me that." "I'm still learning," she admitted. "It's hard to change habits of a lifetime." "For all of us," I agreed. As for Melissa and Rick, their marriage remained a work in progress. The Freedom Tour had exposed fundamental differences in their values and priorities. They began couples counseling, cautiously rebuilding trust that had fractured during their months of nomadic chaos. My relationship with them transformed as well. Rick and I developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect that hadn't existed before. With Melissa, I established clearer boundaries while finding new ways to connect. I visited them in Nevada during spring break, spending quality time with Maya and Tyler while maintaining appropriate distance from their parents' rebuilding efforts. The most profound change occurred within me. Through standing firm despite guilt, manipulation, and family pressure, I discovered a self-respect that no external validation could provide. The boundaries I'd struggled to establish in therapy became natural extensions of my self-worth rather than defensive walls. "You seem different," Dr. Winters observed during our now monthly check-in. "More centered." "I feel different," I confirmed. "Like I'm finally the author of my own story instead of a supporting character in everyone else's." Thanksgiving arrived, the first family gathering since the confrontation that had changed everything. I flew to Nevada rather than having them travel to Chicago, a practical choice that acknowledged their still recovering finances. The modest apartment was transformed for the occasion. A folding table extended through the living room, covered with a tablecloth Melissa had found at a local thrift store. The children had created handmade decorations that lined the walls. My parents arrived the day before I did, our mother having apparently packed half her kitchen to ensure a proper holiday meal. Awkwardness lingered beneath the surface as we gathered around the table. Old patterns threatened to re-emerge in subtle ways. My mother automatically served Melissa the largest portion. My father began a story about that time Melissa charmed the traffic cop before catching himself. I felt the gravitational pull of my usual peacekeeper role when tension briefly flickered, but something fundamental had shifted. When Melissa made a passing comment about hopefully being on the road again by next Thanksgiving, Rick gently but firmly countered, "We've talked about this. The kids need consistency." Instead of backing down, he maintained eye contact until she nodded slightly. My mother, surprisingly, supported him. "The children are flourishing here. Maya's reading has improved so much, and Tyler seems much more confident." Small moments of realignment, subtle but significant. After dinner, while the others watched football, I helped Maya with a school project at the kitchen table. She worked diligently, occasionally asking thoughtful questions that revealed her sharp intelligence. "Aunt Sophia," she said during a pause. "Remember when we lived in the van and I was sad all the time?" My heart constricted. "Yes, sweetheart. I remember." "I'm not sad anymore," she said simply, returning to her project with the straightforward resilience of childhood. Later that evening, stepping outside for fresh air, I found Melissa on the small patio, staring at the modest view of neighboring apartments. "Not quite the Grand Canyon sunset," she remarked as I joined her. "No," I agreed. "But it has its own kind of beauty." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm trying, Sophia, to accept this life, to find contentment and stability rather than constant novelty." She sighed. "It's harder than I expected." "Growth usually is," I said gently. "The thing nobody tells you about chasing freedom," she said slowly, "is that sometimes you end up more trapped than before. In debt, in a broken-down van, in relationships strained to breaking point." I nodded, letting her continue. "I'm not saying I regret everything about our journey. There were moments, seeing the children's faces when they spotted their first wild horses, stargazing in the desert. Those memories are real." She turned to me. "But so is this apartment. So is Maya's improved reading. So is Rick's promotion. So is having enough money for groceries without panicking." "Different kinds of richness," I offered. "Yeah," she smiled faintly. "I'm learning to appreciate both." We stood in companionable silence until she added, "Thank you for not giving us what we demanded, for giving us what we needed instead." It couldn't have been easy standing against everyone. It wasn't, I admitted. But sometimes the hardest choice is the right one. Returning inside, watching my family interact in this humble space, I reflected on the journey we'd all taken. Not the Instagram-worthy freedom tour Melissa had envisioned, but a different kind of journey, one of emotional growth, redefined relationships, and hard-earned wisdom. The lesson crystallized: love doesn't mean the absence of boundaries. True support isn't measured by sacrifice, but by sustainability. Family loyalty shouldn't require surrendering your own well-being. And sometimes, the most loving act is simply standing firm when everyone expects you to give way. I carry this wisdom now not as a burden, but as a gift. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who expected too much, or found yourself enabling behavior that ultimately harmed someone you love? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching and take care.